They told him I was dead. They mourned me. They buried an empty grave with my name carved into stone. But I wasn't dead. I was below him, chained, starved, forgotten. For 8 years I lived in the dark, while he slept beside the woman who put me there. The west orchards burned like the end of the world. Lysandra ran through smoke so thick it swallowed the stars, her bare feet slipping on blood-slicked grass, her lungs screaming for air that tasted like ash and death. The night had shattered without warning. One moment she'd been picking late-harvest apples with the other young wolves, laughing beneath lantern light. The next, the world exploded into fangs and fire and the howls of rogues tearing through the border like a plague. 15 years old, and she understood in that instant what it meant to be prey. Bodies littered the ground around her. Wolves she'd grown up with, elders who'd taught her to read moon phases, children who'd played chase through these same trees just days ago. The rogues moved like shadows with teeth, feral and mindless, their eyes empty of reason or mercy. They killed for the thrill of it, for the chaos, for the taste of pack blood on their tongues. Lysandra stumbled over a fallen branch, her hands catching against rough bark, splinters driving into her palms. Pain flared hot and immediate, but she didn't stop, couldn't stop. Her mother's voice echoed through her mind like a prayer she'd memorized without knowing she'd need it so desperately. Some wolves are born to survive the grave and still rise. She'd said it once, years ago, while braiding Lysandra's hair by firelight. At the time, it had sounded like poetry. Now it felt like prophecy. The screams were everywhere, wolves fighting, dying, calling for help that wouldn't come fast enough. The border guards had fallen first, overwhelmed before they could sound the alarm properly. By the time the inner pack realized what was happening, the rogues had already carved through half the orchard encampment like a blade through silk. Lysandra's wolf clawed at her insides, desperate to emerge, to fight, to defend. But she was too young still, her first shift incomplete, her wolf more instinct than form. All she had was speed and the will to survive, so she ran toward the river, toward the one place she remembered her father saying was defensible, the stone bridge where the water ran too fast and deep for rogues to easily cross. She almost made it. A rogue lunged from the shadows, all matted fur and rotting teeth, its claws extended toward her throat. Lysandra threw herself sideways, hitting the ground hard, her shoulder slamming into stone. The rogue snarled, circling, eyes gleaming with hunger and madness. She scrambled backward, her hands searching desperately for anything, a rock, a branch, anything to defend herself with. And then the world shifted. The air pressure changed first. A presence so powerful, it made the flames bend sideways, made the smoke curl away like it was afraid to touch him. The rogue's snarl cut off mid-breath, its body going rigid with sudden, primal terror. Welcome back, my amazing viewers. Before we dive deeper into the story, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment below telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love seeing how far our stories reach. All right. Settle in, take a breath, and let's get back to it. Lysandra looked up. Through the haze and firelight, she saw him. Alpha Prince Adrian Valcor arrived like a storm given wolf form, massive, dark-furred, eyes blazing with lethal gold. His wolf moved with a predator's grace and a king's authority. He hit the rogue with such force the creature didn't even have time to whimper before its neck snapped like kindling. The body dropped, lifeless, and Adrian shifted mid-motion, human again, blood-stained and breathing hard, his presence so overwhelming Lysandra forgot how to breathe. He was perhaps 17, maybe 18, tall and broad-shouldered, with black hair that fell into fierce eyes and a face carved from moonlight and violence. His skin was marked with fresh wounds, his hands still clawed, his chest heaving with battle fury that hadn't fully settled. But it was his scent that destroyed her, pine and winter rain, and something wild and eternal, something that made her wolf surge upward like it recognized home after a lifetime of wandering. The bond snapped into place between them with such force, Lysandra gasped aloud, her hand flying to her chest where her heart suddenly felt too large, too loud, too connected to his. Adrian staggered, his eyes going wide, his wolf rising to the surface as he turned fully toward her. Recognition flared in his gaze, not of her face, but of something deeper, something written in soul and starlight, an ancient magic older than the packs themselves. Fated mates. The moon goddess had marked them, bound them, declared them before either had even spoken a word. Around them, the battle was ending. Adrian's warriors swept through the remaining rogues with brutal efficiency, their alpha's arrival having turned the tide completely. But Lysandra barely registered any of it. She couldn't look away from Adrian, couldn't breathe past the bond that wrapped around her ribs like chains made of moonlight. He moved toward her slowly, carefully, like approaching something precious and terrified. When he knelt beside her, his hand reaching out to cup her face with a gentleness that contradicted the blood still dripping from his fingers, Lysandra felt her entire world reorganize itself around this single moment. "You're safe now," Adrian whispered, his voice rough with emotion and battle strain. His thumb brushed across her cheekbone, wiping away ash and tears she hadn't realized she'd cried. "I've got you." His wolf hummed beneath his skin, calling to hers, and even though she couldn't shift yet, couldn't fully answer, her soul responded with a certainty that felt like destiny clicking into place. The pack saw it. Everyone who survived, everyone who gathered in the aftermath as dawn began to break over the ruined orchards, they all witnessed the moment their future alpha found his fated mate among the survivors. Elders bowed their heads in recognition. Healers smiled despite their grief. Warriors who'd served Adrian's father for decades nodded with solemn approval. In the space of a single night, Lysandra Thorne went from nobody to everything. The girl who would be Luna. In the days that followed, as the pack buried their dead and rebuilt what the rogues had destroyed, Adrian stayed close. He couldn't help it. The bond was too new, too powerful, pulling him toward her like gravity. But he had responsibilities, trials to complete before he could fully claim his position as Alpha King. Ancient laws and pack traditions that couldn't be ignored, no matter how much his wolf snarled in protest. On the 7th day, he found Lysandra by the memorial stones, her fingers tracing names carved into granite. "I have to leave," Adrian said quietly, standing close enough that his warmth chased away the autumn chill. 2 years, maybe less if I can complete the trials faster. But I will come back for you, Lysandra. The moon marked you mine. Nothing will change that. She'd looked up at him with eyes too old for 15, made ancient by survival and loss. "I'll wait," she promised. "I'll be here." He'd kissed her forehead then, a gesture so tender it made her chest ache. His lips lingered against her skin, and she felt his wolf mark her spiritually. Not a claiming bite, they were too young for that, but a promise etched in magic that said mine, always mine. Wait for me. Adrian left the next morning, his warriors flanking him, his future stretching ahead like a path carved in starlight. Lysandra watched him go, her hand pressed against her chest, where the bond thrummed steady and sure. She believed in destiny that day. She believed in promises and fate and the moon goddess's perfect design. She believed she would see him again. She was so young, so foolishly, tragically young, because as she turned to walk back toward the village, toward the temporary shelter where survivors were staying, a figure stepped from the shadows of the tree line, elegant, poised. Beautiful in a way that felt calculated and cold. Muriel Ashcroft, the Alpha Prince's political betrothed, stood with her hands clasped delicately before her, her expression perfectly neutral except for her eyes. Her eyes burned with the kind of rage that kingdoms fall to. She'd seen everything, the bond, the promise, the way Adrian's wolf had bent toward Lysandra like iron pulled by moon-forged magnet. She'd watched her entire future dissolve in the span of a single fated moment. Lysandra felt ice slide down her spine as Muriel smiled, a smile that held no warmth, only calculation. "Hello, little Luna," Muriel said softly, her voice sweet as poisoned honey. "We should talk." Lysandra never made it back to the village. By sunset, the pack would be told she'd died from injuries sustained during the attack. By nightfall, her name would be added to the memorial stones. By midnight, she would disappear into darkness so complete, even the moon goddess would lose sight of her light. And Adrian, returning 2 years later to claim his mate, would find only a grave. Lysandra woke to darkness so complete, it felt like being swallowed by the earth itself. Her head pounded with a sickly, hollow ache that radiated from her temples down through her jaw. Her mouth tasted like copper, and something bitter. Herbs she didn't recognize, twisted into some concoction that left her tongue thick and her thoughts sluggish. When she tried to move, cold metal bit into her wrists, the clink of chains echoing in the Kongness around her. Panic surged hot and immediate, burning through the fog in her mind. She pulled against the restraints, her wolf rising instinctively to help, but something was wrong. Her wolf felt distant, muffled, like trying to hear through water. The bond that should have connected her to her inner beast felt strangled, choked by whatever poison still crawled through her veins. "I wouldn't struggle if I were you," a voice said from somewhere in the darkness, smooth, cultured, utterly devoid of warmth. "The more you fight, the deeper the iron bites. And we wouldn't want you damaging yourself permanently. Not yet, anyway." Lysandra's eyes strained against the blackness, searching for the source. Slowly, agonizingly, her vision adjusted enough to make out shapes. Stone walls, slick with moisture, a ceiling so low and oppressive it felt like a tomb. And there, holding a single candle that cast her face in hellish shadow, Muriel Ashcroft. She looked nothing like she had at the memorial stones. Gone was the delicate grief, the carefully maintained neutrality. Here, in this forgotten place where no one could witness, Muriel wore her true face. Cold, calculated, eyes sharp with intelligence and something darker, the kind of ambition that would burn the world to ash if it meant securing her throne. "Where?" Lysandra's voice came out broken, barely more than a rasp. "Where am I?" "The Bloodstone Caverns," Muriel said pleasantly, as if discussing the weather. She moved closer, her dress rustling against stone, the candlelight making her shadow dance across the walls like something monstrous. "Built during the old plague eras, centuries ago. When wolves feared disease more than death, they'd isolate the infected down here, seal them away where the sickness couldn't spread. Eventually, everyone forgot about these tunnels. They're not on any modern maps. No guards patrol here. No healers check the old quarantine cells." She crouched down, bringing her face level with Lysandra's, close enough that the girl could see the absolute absence of mercy in her gaze. "No one remembers these caverns exist," Muriel whispered, "which makes them perfect." Horror crept up Lysandra's spine like frost. "They'll look for me. Adrian believes you're dead." The words hit like a physical blow. Lysandra's breath caught, her heart stuttering against her ribs. "No," she breathed. "No, that's not—" "I made sure of it." Muriel stood, smoothing her skirts with the casual ease of someone who'd committed treason and felt no remorse whatsoever. The healer's report was quite conclusive. Internal injuries from the rogue attack, delayed trauma, organ failure, very tragic, very believable, especially when the registry page with your name mysteriously burned in a kitchen fire the next morning, and the guards who were supposed to escort you back to the village? Well, they're quite loyal to my family. Gold can buy many things, Lysandra, silence being the least expensive. Lysandra shook her head, denial warring with the terrible truth settling like stones in her stomach. "The bond. Adrian will feel the bond. He'll know I'm alive." "Will he?" Muriel tilted her head, genuinely curious. "You're so young. Your wolf hasn't even fully emerged yet. The bond is spiritual, yes, but unfinished, fragile. And Adrian is miles away, completing trials that will consume every ounce of his focus for the next 2 years. She smiled, sharp and cutting. By the time he returns, you'll have been dead so long he won't question it. Grief will have already carved out the space where you should have been. And I'll be there, patient and perfect, ready to fill that void. He'll never accept you, Lysandra spat, finding her voice through the terror. The moon goddess chose. The moon goddess, Muriel interrupted, her tone dripping with disdain, chose poorly. A 15-year-old nobody with no title, no political value, no strategic worth whatsoever. Just a pretty face and a convenient bond that threatens everything my family has worked decades to secure. She leaned down again, her breath cold against Lysandra's cheek. I've been groomed since birth to be Luna, trained in politics, warfare, diplomacy. I've studied pack law, trade agreements, alliance structures. I am the perfect match for an alpha king, and I will not be replaced by a child who happened to smell right. The candle flickered, casting monstrous shadows that swallowed half of Muriel's face. So, here's what's going to happen, she continued, her voice dropping to something almost gentle, which made it infinitely more terrifying. You're going to stay down here. Alive, yes, because killing you outright might risk the bond somehow alerting him. But forgotten, hidden, fed just enough to survive, given herbs to keep your wolf suppressed, kept in darkness until you forget what sunlight feels like. She straightened, already turning away, the matter settled in her mind like closing a book. Stay dead, little ghost, Muriel said over her shoulder, because the world above has already buried you. The candle moved away, taking the light with it, and Lysandra was plunged back into absolute darkness. She heard the sound of a heavy door closing, a lock sliding into place, chains being secured from the outside, and then footsteps, growing fainter and fainter until there was nothing but silence and the slow, steady drip of water somewhere in the blackness. Lysandra pulled against the chains until her wrists bled, screamed until her throat went raw, called for Adrian through the bond until her soul felt shredded and hollow. No one came. No one heard. Above ground, the pack gathered for her funeral. They burned incense and spoke her name with reverence. They added her to the memorial stones, carved her identity into granite for future generations to remember. They mourned the girl their future alpha had chosen, the mate the moon goddess had marked, the Luna who would never be. Adrian, hundreds of miles away, collapsed during a trial when grief hit him like a knife between the ribs. His wolf howled for 3 days straight, refusing to be comforted, raging against a loss that felt like having his soul torn in half. And below the earth, in bloodstone caverns that predated memory, Lysandra learned what it meant to be erased. She counted the water drips at first, tried to mark time by the ache in her muscles, the rhythm of her own heartbeat. She named every chain link, every stone within reach of her fingertips. She recited her mother's words like prayers, clinging to the only lifeline she had left. Some wolves are born to survive the grave and still rise. Days blurred into weeks, weeks into months. Muriel visited occasionally, always with that same cold smile, always with more suppressant herbs that kept Lysandra's wolf buried deep and silent. She'd whisper updates sometimes, just to twist the knife. How the pack was healing, how Adrian had returned, broken but dutiful, how he'd accepted the marriage arrangement because what else was there to do when your fated mate was ash and memory? He doesn't smile anymore, Muriel said once, almost wistfully. His wolf won't answer mine, but he's obedient, loyal to duty if nothing else. He'll give me the title, even if he can't give me the bond. She'd left Lysandra shaking in the darkness, rage and helplessness warring in her chest. But Lysandra didn't break. She endured. Because somewhere deep in her bones, past the suppressants and chains and endless night, her wolf still breathed, distant and drugged and barely a whisper, but alive, and a soul bond, once forged by the moon goddess herself, couldn't truly die. It could only wait, silent and patient and inevitable. For the moment, destiny decided to break open again. Adrian Valcour returned home, a different man than the one who'd left. 2 years of trials had carved away whatever softness remained in him. He'd fought challenges that would have broken lesser wolves, survived tests designed to forge alpha kings from raw ambition and bloodshed. He'd walked through fire, led armies through impossible terrain, negotiated peace treaties with enemies who spoke only the language of violence. He'd done everything required of him, exceeded every expectation, proved himself worthy of the crown that waited. And through it all, one thought had kept him breathing. Lysandra. Her name was a prayer he whispered in the darkness between battles. Her face was the image that steadied him when doubt crept in. The bond hummed beneath his ribs like a second heartbeat, distant but present, a constant reminder that someone was waiting for him, that he had something worth surviving for beyond duty and legacy. He returned with his father's blessing, with warriors who'd pledged their loyalty, with the right to claim both throne and mate. He rode through the gates of Valcour Keep expecting celebration. He found mourning instead. The elders met him in the great hall, their faces grave with a sorrow that made his wolf rise with sudden, terrible premonition. They spoke carefully, gently, as if their words were blades that might shatter him if wielded too roughly. There was an infection, internal damage from the rogue attack that the healers didn't catch in time. She deteriorated quickly. Peacefully. We buried her with honors, Adrian. She's with the moon goddess now. The world tilted sideways. Adrian heard the words, understood their meaning on some distant intellectual level, but his body rejected them completely. His wolf surged forward, snarling denial, searching desperately for the bond that should have told him, should have warned him, should have screamed across any distance that his mate was dying. But there was nothing. Just silence, where Lysandra's presence should have been. Just emptiness, where the bond had hummed for 2 years. His wolf howled then, a sound so anguished, so utterly broken, that wolves 3 territories away felt it like a wound across their own souls. The sound tore from his throat for hours, until his voice went raw and his body collapsed from sheer emotional exhaustion. When he finally went quiet, something in him had fundamentally changed. His wolf retreated into a silence so complete it felt like death. Not gone, but absent. Present, but unwilling to answer, unwilling to engage, unwilling to exist in a world where fate had played such a cruel trick. Muriel found him at Lysandra's memorial stone 3 days later. She approached carefully, her movements graceful and measured, her face arranged in perfect sympathy. She wore mourning gray that made her look ethereal and tragic, a portrait of noble grief. When she knelt beside him, her hand settling gently on his shoulder, Adrian didn't pull away. He had nothing left to pull away with. "I'm sorry," Muriel whispered, her voice soft as silk. "I know this isn't what either of us wanted, but the pack needs its alpha, Adrian. They need you strong, not broken. Let me help you carry this. Let me stand beside you, even if it's not in the way the moon goddess intended." Adrian looked at her with eyes that held nothing but hollowness. "I can't bond with you," he said flatly. "My wolf won't answer anyone. Not anymore." "I know." Muriel's smile was sad, understanding, perfect. "I'm not asking for your heart, just your partnership. The pack deserves a united leadership. We can give them that much, at least." 3 months later, they married in a ceremony so cold it might as well have been a funeral. Adrian spoke his vows like reciting pack law, dutiful, emotionless, final. He placed the Luna's mark on Muriel's wrist with the same detachment he'd used signing trade agreements. When the ritual ended and the pack howled their approval, his wolf remained utterly, devastatingly silent. Muriel wore her crown with flawless grace, accepting congratulations and pledges of loyalty with the poise of someone born for this exact moment. And below the earth, in bloodstone caverns that no celebration reached, Lysandra heard the distant howls and understood what they meant. He'd married her. The woman who'd stolen everything had won. Years passed like slow-moving poison. Above ground, Adrian became the alpha king his father had envisioned. Ruthless in politics, unstoppable in warfare, a strategist so brilliant that neighboring packs either swore allegiance or fell beneath his dominance. He expanded territory, secured alliances, turned Valcour Keep into the most powerful seat in the Northern Territories. His warriors respected him. His enemies feared him. His people prospered under his leadership. But he never smiled, never laughed, never showed anything beyond cold competence and controlled fury. His wolf remained locked away, a ghost inside his own body. Muriel tried everything: bonding ceremonies, moon rituals, consultations with every healer in 5 territories. Nothing worked. His wolf had chosen silence, and no amount of magic or politics could force it to answer. Muriel adapted. She learned to play the role of sympathetic Luna, the devoted wife supporting a husband still grieving his true mate. The pack adored her for it: her patience, her grace, her dedication to a marriage that would never be truly complete. In public, she was perfection. In private, she descended into the dark. "He fought 3 territorial challenges this month," Muriel said one evening, her voice echoing through the bloodstone caverns as she stood before Lysandra's chains. 6 years had passed. Lysandra was 21 now, though she barely looked it, gaunt, scarred, kept alive through sheer stubborn will and the bare minimum of sustenance Muriel provided. Won everyone without breaking a sweat. The northern packs call him the Winter King now. Cold, brutal, untouchable. She crouched down, tilting her head as she studied Lysandra's face with clinical detachment. "He never calls your name anymore," Muriel whispered, and her smile was a knife sliding between ribs. "I think he's finally accepted that you're gone, that his wolf was broken beyond repair, that I'm all he has left." Lysandra stared back with eyes that had learned to hide everything. She didn't flinch, didn't cry. Didn't give Muriel the satisfaction of seeing her break. "He had a nightmare last week," Muriel continued, standing again, smoothing her expensive silk gown. "Woke up gasping, reaching for something that wasn't there. I tried to comfort him, but he just turned away. Still won't let me touch him beyond what's necessary for public appearances." Her voice hardened. "Even dead, you haunt him. It's infuriating, really." She left without another word, taking the light with her. And Lysandra sat in the darkness, counting stones for the 1,000th time, naming scars, reciting her mother's words like a mantra that kept her tethered to sanity. Some wolves are born to survive the grave and still rise. She learned patience in the dark, learned to exist in the space between life and death, to endure without hope, because hope was a luxury that would drive her mad. She memorized every word Muriel spoke, catalogued every slip, every detail about the world above that might someday matter. She learned that survival wasn't about staying whole. It was about staying alive long enough for destiny to remember it had unfinished business. 7 years became 8. Adrian grew colder, harder, more untouchable. He threw himself into war, into politics, into anything that kept him from thinking about the emptiness inside his chest. His reputation spread like winter frost. The alpha king who could not be moved, could not be manipulated, could not be broken because he was already shattered. Muriel perfected her mask so completely that even she sometimes forgot where the performance ended and her real self began. She played Luna with such conviction that the pack never suspected the monster she became when she descended those forgotten stairs. But masks crack eventually, and bonds forged by the moon goddess don't dissolve just because one half thinks the other is dead. They go dormant, silent, waiting. For the moment, an alpha king, seeking solitude and distance from a marriage that suffocated him, demands access to the oldest sealed wings of his own keep. For the moment, his wolf, dead for 8 years, suddenly flickers awake with confused recognition. For the moment, he follows a scent he thought he'd imagined, down stairs that shouldn't exist, toward a door that was never supposed to open again. In the darkness, Lysandra counted her 2,914th stone. She had no way of knowing that above her, destiny was finally preparing to crack wide open. The Northern War ended the way all of Adrian's wars ended, with absolute victory and rivers of blood. 3 years of brutal conflict, territories contested over frozen battlegrounds, diplomatic failures turned to violence that consumed entire packs. Adrian had led his warriors through campaigns that would be taught in pack histories for generations. Strategic brilliance married to ruthless execution. He'd crushed rebellions, absorbed enemy territories, and emerged with his crown heavier and his soul emptier than ever before. When he finally rode back through the gates of Valcour Keep, his warriors bore the scars of triumph, and his enemies bore only graves. The pack celebrated for 3 days, feasts and howls and victory songs that echoed through the stone halls. Miriel stood beside him throughout, the perfect Luna, radiant and proud, accepting praise and pledges of loyalty with practiced grace. Adrian endured it all with the same cold detachment he'd perfected over 8 years. When the celebrations finally ended, when the last warrior stumbled drunk to bed and the halls fell silent, Adrian stood alone in his private chambers and felt the weight of everything pressing down like a mountain on his chest. He was 33 years old, Alpha King of the most powerful territory in the North, undefeated in battle, unchallenged in politics, and utterly, devastatingly hollow. His wolf hadn't spoken in 8 years. That silence had become so familiar, he'd almost forgotten what it felt like to have his beast answer. Almost forgotten the sensation of being whole instead of this fractured thing wearing a crown and pretending competence meant the same as living. He needed space, distance, somewhere far from Miriel's concerned gazes and the pack's expectations and the constant performance of being the Alpha King who had everything except the one thing that mattered: the old wings. The thought came to him suddenly, a memory of dusty corridors and forgotten chambers that no one had entered in decades. His father had sealed them off before Adrian was born, deemed them unnecessary when the keep's main structures were more than sufficient, but they were vast, private, and more importantly, empty of everything that reminded him of his current life. He could convert them. War archives, perhaps, historical records. A place to store the weight of everything he'd done without having it constantly visible in the inhabited sections of the keep. He summoned the Master of Works the next morning. "Reopen the eastern old wings," Adrian ordered, his voice carrying the tone that made wolves jump to obey. "I want full structural assessment, repairs where necessary, and conversion plans for archive storage." The Master of Works bowed deeply. "Of course, Alpha. Though I should mention, those sections haven't been maintained in over 50 years. The lower levels especially. I don't care how long it takes. Begin immediately." By noon, crews were already breaking the seals on doors that hadn't opened in Adrian's lifetime. By evening, Miriel appeared in his study, her expression carefully neutral, but something sharp flickering behind her eyes. "I heard about the old wings," she said, settling gracefully into the chair across from his desk. "That's quite an undertaking. Are you certain it's necessary? There are other spaces that could serve as archives without requiring such extensive renovation." Adrian didn't look up from the territory maps spread before him. "I've made my decision." "Of course." Her voice remained pleasant, but he caught the slight tension in her shoulders. "I only wonder if you've considered the structural instability. Those lower sections were built on older foundations. There could be hazards, collapses, gas pockets from underground springs. Perhaps I could show you alternative locations that would be safer." "Miriel." Adrian finally raised his eyes to meet hers, and something in his gaze made her words die. "I appreciate your concern, but I don't require your management on this matter." She smiled, perfect and practiced. "As you wish, my lord." But as she left, Adrian noticed how her hands trembled slightly against her skirts. The pull started 3 days later. Adrian was reviewing reports when it hit him, a sensation so foreign he almost didn't recognize it. A stirring deep in his chest, a flicker of awareness that felt like his wolf lifting its head for the first time in 8 years. Not fully awake, just noticing something. He stood abruptly, his chair scraping against stone, his hand pressing against his sternum where the sensation originated. It wasn't pain, wasn't discomfort. It was recognition without context, instinct without explanation. His feet moved before his mind could question it. He walked through the keep's halls, following something he couldn't name. Staff moved aside quickly, sensing his focus, his sudden intensity. He descended stairs he rarely used, moved through corridors freshly cleared by work crews, followed the pull deeper into the old wings than anyone had ventured yet. His wolf stirred again, stronger this time, confused, searching. Adrian's breath caught. He hadn't felt his wolf move in so long he'd convinced himself it was gone forever. But this was unmistakable. His beast was reaching for something, drawn by instinct older than consciousness. A memory surfaced unbidden. Lysandra's face, 16 and terrified in firelight, the bond snapping into place like the universe rearranging itself. Her scent, wildflowers and summer rain and something uniquely, perfectly her. Impossible. She was dead, buried 8 years. Mourned and remembered and lost. But his wolf didn't care about logic. It pushed forward, pulling him deeper, down another staircase that opened into sections older than the keep itself. Stone architecture that predated modern construction, rough-hewn and ancient. The air changed, colder, damp, carrying scents of rust and earth and something else, something that made his wolf snarl with sudden, violent recognition. Adrian's hands shook. He found the door purely by instinct, hidden behind a false wall that work crews hadn't reached yet, sealed with iron locks that had rusted into place over decades. Chains wound around the handles, securing it like something that was never meant to be opened again. His wolf howled inside his mind. The first sound it had made in 8 years, and the sound was pure anguish. "No," Adrian whispered. But his hands were already moving, already ripping the chains away with strength born from desperate hope and terrible fear. The locks shattered under his grip. The door resisted at first, then gave way with a groan of protesting metal. Darkness poured out like a living thing. He stood at the threshold, his enhanced vision struggling to pierce the absolute black beyond. The air that escaped smelled of imprisonment and suffering and suppressant herbs he recognized from ancient medical texts. And beneath it all, impossibly devastatingly, a scent he'd thought was lost forever. His wolf went absolutely still. Not silent. Still. Like a predator that had just spotted prey it thought was extinct. Adrian's voice came out broken, barely more than a breath. "Who's there?" Silence answered him for 3 heartbeats. Adrian didn't remember moving. One moment he was frozen at the threshold, disbelief and impossible hope warring in his chest. The next, he was tearing through the darkness like a man possessed, his hands finding cold iron bars, then chains, then finally, devastatingly, warm skin stretched too tight over bones that shouldn't be so prominent. His wolf erupted inside him with such force he nearly shifted involuntarily. 8 years of silence shattered in an instant, replaced by a howl so anguished and furious it felt like his soul was being ripped apart and reformed simultaneously. "Light!" Adrian roared back toward the doorway, his voice carrying the alpha command that made wolves 3 floors above scramble to obey. "Now!" Footsteps thundered. Within seconds, guards appeared with torches, their flames pushing back the darkness that had held dominion for so long. And Adrian finally saw her. The world tilted violently sideways. Lysandra Thorne, his mate, his Luna, the girl he'd mourned for 8 years, sat chained to bloodstone walls like something out of a nightmare. Her hair hung in matted tangles around a face too thin, too pale, marked with scars that told stories of suffering Adrian's mind couldn't yet process. Her clothes were little more than rags. Her wrists were raw and bloody, where iron shackles had bitten into skin for so long the wounds never fully healed. But her eyes, even sunken and haunted, even filled with pain that made his chest physically ache, her eyes were the same. That same fierce intelligence, that same stubborn will that had called to him 8 years ago in burning orchards. "Lysandra," he breathed, and her name on his lips felt like resurrection. She flinched at the sound, as if hearing her own name spoken aloud was painful. When she looked at him, recognition flared in her gaze, followed immediately by something that looked heartbreakingly like grief. "You're real," she whispered, her voice so broken it barely carried. Sometimes I thought I'd imagined you, that the bond was just madness talking." Adrian's hands moved to the chains with trembling urgency, his wolf snarling at every second she remained bound. The iron locks were old, reinforced with runes he recognized from ancient plague protocols, meant to contain, meant to isolate, meant to erase. "Who did this?" Adrian demanded, though something cold and terrible was already crystallizing in his mind. "Who?" "Well, this is unexpected." Muriel's voice cut through the cavern like ice water, smooth and controlled despite the chaos. She stood in the doorway, backlit by torchlight, her expression arranged in careful shock. Behind her, more guards had gathered, their faces pale with confusion and horror. Adrian's head snapped toward her, and something in his gaze made even the most battle-hardened warriors take a step back. "Muriel." His voice carried a lethal edge that could cut steel. "Explain. Now." She descended the stairs with measured grace, her mind clearly working rapidly behind those calculating eyes. When she reached the bottom, she studied Lysandra with an expression that might have passed for genuine confusion if Adrian hadn't spent 8 years learning to read her every micro-expression. "I don't understand," Muriel said carefully. "Adrian, this woman, she looks similar to the girl who died in the orchards, but it's been 8 years. This could be anyone, a rogue spy, perhaps, someone who learned about your lost mate and thought to exploit—" "Don't!" The word came out as a snarl, half human, half wolf. Adrian's beast was so close to the surface his eyes had gone pure gold, his hands elongating into claws as he finally shattered the chains holding Lysandra. "Don't you dare try to spin this!" The bond between them roared to life like a wildfire that had been smothering under ash for 8 years. It slammed through Adrian's chest with such intensity, he staggered, his hand flying to his sternum where pain and recognition and soul-deep certainty blazed hotter than any battlefield wound. His wolf recognized her on every level that mattered: scent, soul, the fundamental truth that lived in marrow and moonlight. This was his mate, not a ghost. Not an imposter. His. "The bond," Adrian gasped, looking at Lysandra with dawning horror. "I feel the bond. How is this possible? They told me you died. The healers said—" "The healers lied," Lysandra said quietly, and her gaze moved past Adrian to lock onto Muriel with an intensity that could have melted stone. "Because she paid them to. She falsified records, burned registry pages, bribed guards. She made sure everyone believed I was dead while she kept me breathing down here." "That's ridiculous," Muriel protested, but her voice had lost some of its smooth certainty. "Adrian, she's clearly disturbed. Years in isolation, perhaps exposure to plague residue in these old caverns. I watched you marry her." Lysandra's words cut through Muriel's excuses like a blade through silk. She was looking at Adrian now, and the betrayal in her eyes, not at him, but at fate itself, made something crack inside his chest. "I heard the howls, the celebration. I was right here, beneath your feet, while you vowed yourself to the woman who stole everything from me." Adrian made a sound that wasn't quite human. His mind raced backward, re-examining every moment of the last 8 years through this new, horrifying lens. Muriel's convenient appearance at his darkest moment, her perfect support, her insistence on certain protocols, certain sealed sections of the keep that were off-limits even to him, the way his wolf had never, not once, answered her, because it had been waiting, dormant but not dead, silent but not severed, waiting for the mate it knew still breathed somewhere in the darkness. "You told me she died," Adrian said, turning slowly toward Muriel. Each word fell like stones. "You stood beside me at her memorial. You comforted me through grief. His voice broke. "You married me knowing she was alive, knowing she was here, beneath us." "Adrian, please." Muriel's mask was cracking now, desperation bleeding through. "You don't understand the politics. She was nobody, a child with no strategic value. I did what was necessary for the pack." "You buried my mate alive." The alpha command in his voice made every wolf in the vicinity drop to their knees involuntarily. "You let me believe she was dead for 8 years. You took vows with me while she screamed in the dark." He moved toward Lysandra, his hands impossibly gentle as he lifted her from the stone floor. She weighed almost nothing, her body wasted from years of bare survival. When he pulled her against his chest, she made a small, broken sound, like someone who'd forgotten what safety felt like. "I've got you," Adrian whispered into her hair, and his wolf was howling inside him, rage and grief and desperate relief tangling into something that felt like his soul was being burned clean and rebuilt simultaneously. "I'm so sorry. Lysandra, I didn't know. I swear I didn't know." "I waited," she breathed against his chest, her fingers curling weakly into his shirt. "You promised you'd come back. I waited." Adrian's vision blurred. He'd spent 8 years grieving, 8 years accepting a cold marriage, 8 years believing fate had played the cruelest trick imaginable. But fate hadn't stolen his mate. His wife had. He turned toward the stairs, carrying Lysandra with the reverence of someone holding something infinitely precious and infinitely broken. Guards scattered before him, their faces pale with shock and dawning understanding. "Adrian, wait!" Muriel reached for his arm, her composure finally shattering. "You can't just think about what this means politically, the alliances, the treaties that hinge on our marriage." Adrian's eyes, pure molten gold, met hers with a look that promised devastation. "You should have thought about politics before you committed treason against a soul bond." His voice was deadly quiet. "Before you imprisoned your alpha's fated mate and let him mourn a lie." He ascended the stairs without looking back, his wolf finally whole again as his mate's heartbeat synchronized with his own. Behind him, Muriel stood in the bloodstone cavern, surrounded by guards whose loyalty had just become very, very uncertain. And above them, the entire foundation of Valcor Keep began to crack. Because the truth, once freed from darkness, burns through lies like wildfire through dead wood. Adrian carried Lysandra to the highest tower of Valcor Keep, the furthest point from the Bloodstone Caverns, where sunlight poured through floor-to-ceiling windows and the air tasted of pine and freedom. She flinched when he set her down on the bed, her body conditioned to expect pain from every touch. The healer he'd summoned, old Marin, who'd served his father and whose loyalty was beyond question, approached slowly, her hands raised in a gesture of peace. "Little one," Marin whispered, her voice breaking as she took in the scars, the malnutrition, the suppressant herb damage that had kept Lysandra's wolf choked for 8 years. "What have they done to you?" Lysandra didn't answer. She stared at the window like someone seeing the sky for the first time, her eyes watering from light, her pupils no longer knew how to process. Adrian stood across the room, his hands clenched into fists, watching her with an expression that cycled between rage and grief, so profound it physically hurt to witness. His wolf prowled restlessly beneath his skin, desperate to protect, to comfort, to erase 8 years of suffering with sheer force of will. But he knew better than to crowd her. She'd survived by becoming small, by learning to disappear. His presence, alpha, mate, the embodiment of everything she'd waited for, was overwhelming in ways she wasn't ready to process yet. "I'll have food brought," Adrian said quietly. "Nothing heavy. Your stomach won't be able to handle much at first." Lysandra's gaze shifted to him, and something flickered in her eyes. Recognition, confusion, a bone-deep wariness that made his chest ache. "You're really here," she whispered. "This isn't... I'm not still dreaming in the dark?" "You're free," Adrian promised, though the word felt hollow given everything she'd endured. "I swear to you, Lysandra, you're safe now." She nodded slowly, but he could see she didn't quite believe him yet. How could she? Safety had been a lie for 8 years. Adrian began his investigation that very night. He moved through the keep like a shadow, questioning servants who'd worked the east wings, guards who'd been stationed near sealed corridors, healers who'd signed death certificates 8 years prior. He demanded records, archives, any documentation that mentioned Lysandra Thorne. What he found made his blood run cold. Registry pages with obvious forgery marks. Healer reports written in different handwriting than the signatures indicated. Guard rotation logs that showed gaps, deliberate blind spots in patrol patterns around the old wing entrances, and payments. Significant gold transfers from Muriel's family accounts to certain key individuals, all dated within weeks of Lysandra's supposed death. "She was thorough," Adrian growled to his head of security, a grizzled wolf named Garrett who'd served 3 generations of Valcor alphas. "Every loose end tied, every witness either bribed or eliminated from service shortly after." Garrett's expression was grim. "The question is how we prove it in a way the Elders' Council will accept. Muriel comes from one of the founding families. Her bloodline carries political weight. If we move against her without ironclad evidence, then we gather ironclad evidence." Adrian's eyes glowed gold in the dim light. "I want every record, every testimony, every piece of documentation that proves what she did. And I want it done quietly. No one outside this room knows we're investigating until I'm ready to destroy her completely." Because this wasn't about revenge. This was about justice. About dismantling her so thoroughly that not even her family's legacy could protect her from the consequences of burying a fated mate alive. Lysandra's recovery was agonizingly slow. Her body healed faster than her mind. Marin fed her carefully measured meals, gradually building her strength back. The scars would fade, most of them. The suppressant damage to her wolf would take longer. "The herbs she used were ancient," Marin explained softly, checking Lysandra's pulse while sunlight streamed through the windows. "Designed to chain a wolf completely. The fact that yours survived at all is remarkable, but it will take time for the damage to reverse." Lysandra nodded silently. She spoke rarely, and only when necessary. 8 years of forced silence had taught her that words were dangerous, that speaking invited pain. But sometimes, when Adrian visited, something in her loosened fractionally. He came every evening, always announcing himself before entering, always keeping distance until she indicated otherwise. He'd sit by the window and talk quietly, about the pack, about territories, about nothing important, just filling the silence so she remembered what voices sounded like when they didn't carry cruelty. On the 5th night, she finally spoke without being asked a question first. "Your wolf," Lysandra said, her voice still raw but stronger than before. "I can feel it again. The bond." Adrian's breath caught. "You can?" She nodded slowly, her hand pressing against her chest. "It's faint, like hearing something through water. But it's there. After all this time, it's still there." His wolf surged forward at her words, reaching across the bond that had gone dormant but never died. And for the first time in 8 years, he felt her wolf answer. Weak, hesitant, damaged, but alive. Adrian's hands trembled. Lysandra. She told me you'd forgotten, Lysandra whispered, staring at her hands. Every time she visited, she'd say you never called my name anymore, that you'd accepted the bond was broken, that I was truly dead to you. Never. The word came out fierce, absolute. My wolf went silent because it was searching for you, because it knew, even when I didn't, that you weren't gone, just hidden. Tears tracked down her face, and she didn't wipe them away. I counted stones, 2,963 of them. I named every scar. I memorized water drip patterns. I did everything I could to stay sane while the world forgot I existed. Adrian crossed the room before he could stop himself, dropping to his knees before her chair. He didn't touch her, but his presence surrounded her like a shield. I will make this right, he vowed, his voice rough with emotion. I will prove what she did. I will strip her of everything she stole. And I will spend the rest of my life ensuring you never feel forgotten again. Lysandra looked at him with eyes that had survived the grave, and slowly, painfully, nodded. 3 weeks into the investigation, Adrian had enough. Testimonies from 6 different sources, all corroborating the same story. Documentation proving financial transactions, healer confessions obtained under Alpha Command, and most damning, a journal entry in Muriel's own handwriting, discovered in a locked drawer of her private study, detailing the exact location of the Bloodstone Caverns and her rationale for keeping Lysandra there. If she dies outright, the bond might alert him somehow, but alive and suppressed, she becomes nothing. A ghost he'll eventually stop searching for. And I become the only Luna he has left. Adrian read those words 3 times before his wolf nearly tore free involuntarily. He summoned the Elders' Council for dawn the next day. When Muriel was escorted into the Great Hall, she wore confidence like armor. She'd spent weeks spinning her own narrative to sympathetic nobles, claiming Adrian had been manipulated by an imposter, that his judgment was compromised by old grief. But when she saw the assembled evidence spread across the council table, her mask cracked. 8 years, Adrian said quietly, his voice carrying through the hall with deadly precision. You stole 8 years from both of us. You buried my mate alive to wear her crown. Muriel's chin lifted, defiance flashing in her eyes even as her world collapsed. And you let me, she said coldly. You accepted the lie because it was easier than questioning. You married me because your wolf was too broken to fight back. Don't pretend you're blameless in this, Adrian. The words hung in the air like poison, because she wasn't entirely wrong, and that truth would haunt him far longer than any trial, but guilt didn't erase justice. Luna Muriel Valcor, the head elder intoned formally. You stand accused of treason against a fated bond, falsification of death records, imprisonment of the true Luna, and conspiracy against the Alpha bloodline. How do you answer these charges? Muriel looked at Adrian one last time, and her smile was bitter, defeated, and utterly without remorse. I did what I had to survive in a world that would have erased me the moment she existed. The council's judgment came swift and absolute. Stripped of title, banished beyond territorial borders, her family name dishonored. And when the sun rose the next morning, Muriel walked through the keep's gates for the last time, leaving behind nothing but ashes of a crown that was never truly hers. The tribunal was held beneath the full moon, as moon law demanded. The entire pack gathered in the ancient stone circle that had witnessed judgments for centuries. A place where lies withered under silver light and truth blazed like sacred fire. Torches ringed the perimeter, their flames dancing in the night wind, but it was the moon herself that illuminated the proceedings with cold, impartial clarity. Adrian stood at the center, flanked by the Elders' Council. To his right, wrapped in a cloak that couldn't quite hide how thin she still was, stood Lysandra. Her first time facing the pack that had mourned her, her first time standing in moonlight after 8 years of absolute darkness. She trembled, but she didn't look away. Across from them, bound in silver chains that prevented shifting, Miriel stood with her spine straight and her chin high. Even now, facing her unraveling, she wore dignity like armor. Her family sat in the crowd, their faces pale with shame and fury, knowing their legacy was about to be shattered. The head elder, an ancient wolf named Cassius, whose gray hair spoke of 5 decades serving moon law, raised his hands for silence. The pack's murmurs died instantly. "We gather under the moon goddess's witness to judge accusations of the highest treason," Cassius intoned, his voice carrying across the circle. "Treason against a fated bond. Treason against the sacred marks of destiny itself. Luna Miriel Valcor stands accused. Let the evidence speak." What followed was systematic devastation. Garrett presented the falsified death records, pointing out where different hands had written different sections. Marin testified about the specific suppressant herbs found in Lysandra's system. Rare, expensive, requiring years of consistent administration. Former guards, granted immunity in exchange for truth, confessed to being paid to ignore certain corridors, to falsify patrol logs, to never question why their Luna descended to sealed wings in the dead of night. And then came the journal. Adrian read the passage aloud himself, his voice steady despite the rage that burned beneath every word. When he reached the line about keeping Lysandra alive but suppressed, gasps rippled through the crowd. Miriel's expression never changed. She stared at the moon like it might offer her salvation, but the silver light only illuminated her guilt more starkly. "These are lies," Miriel said finally, her voice carrying the trained authority of 8 years as Luna. "Fabrications designed to elevate an imposter. Anyone could claim to be the lost mate. Where is your proof she's truly who she claims?" Cassius nodded slowly. "A fair question, which is why we will invoke the oldest confirmation." He gestured to the ritual circle carved into the stone at the center of the gathering. Ancient runes that predated the keep itself, designed for one purpose, to let the moon goddess speak truth through her children's wolves. "If Lysandra Thorne is truly the fated mate of Alpha Adrian Valcor," Cassius declared, "then the bond will manifest under moon blessing. If she is an imposter, the ritual will reveal that as well. And if Luna Miriel speaks truth about her innocence, her own wolf will testify to her honor." Adrian watched Miriel's face carefully. For the first time all night, he saw fear flicker in her eyes. Miriel started, but Cassius raised his hand. "Moon law accepts no refusals. Step into the circle, Luna Miriel." She had no choice. 2 guards escorted her forward, removing the silver chains only once she stood within the runes. Moonlight seemed to concentrate there, growing brighter, more focused. "Call your wolf," Cassius commanded. "Let it testify to your bond with the Alpha King." Miriel closed her eyes, her face strained with effort, her body trembling as she reached for her wolf. The pack waited in absolute silence. Nothing happened. No shift, no glow of transformation, not even a flicker of amber eyes. Miriel tried again, desperation creeping into her posture. Her wolf had always answered before, strong, proud, befitting a Luna of her status. But now, under the moon's judgment, it refused her completely. "Your wolf rejects you," Cassius said quietly, and there was almost sadness in his voice. "It knows what you are, what you've done, and it will not testify on behalf of treason." Miriel's eyes snapped open, wild with panic. No, my wolf is just—" "Step back," Cassius commanded, and guards moved forward to escort her from the circle. Then he turned to Lysandra, his ancient eyes gentling. "Child, will you enter?" Lysandra looked at Adrian, and he nodded once. encouragement, faith, absolute certainty. She walked into the circle on legs that had only recently relearned how to carry her without stumbling. When moonlight touched her fully, something inside her chest cracked open, not painfully, but like a door that had been locked for so long she'd forgotten it existed. Her wolf stirred. Not the distant, muffled thing she'd felt through suppressants, not the choked, dying creature that had barely survived 8 years of chemical imprisonment. This was her wolf fully awakened, rising, returning. Silver light erupted around Lysandra like liquid starlight, so bright several wolves had to shield their eyes. Her wolf didn't fully shift, but its presence blazed through her aura. Luminous, fierce, undeniable, and most importantly, reaching across the space between her and Adrian with recognition so profound it resonated through every wolf present. The mate bond manifested visibly for the first time, a silver thread connecting their souls that the entire pack could witness. Adrian's wolf answered with a roar that shook the stone beneath their feet. Gold light flared around him, his alpha presence magnified tenfold by the bond's completion. The two auras intertwined, merged, became something greater than either alone. The pack felt it like a shockwave. This was no manufactured connection, no political arrangement. This was destiny written in moonlight and blood, an ancient magic that predated their civilization. "The moon goddess has spoken," Cassius declared, his voice thick with emotion. "Lysandra Thorne is the true fated mate of Alpha King Adrian Valcor. The bond is absolute, undeniable, sacred." He turned to Miriel, and his expression hardened. "You stand convicted by the moon herself. You imprisoned the true Luna. You wore a crown that was never yours. You committed treason against destiny itself." "I did what I had to survive," Miriel whispered, all her composure finally shattered. "In a world where bloodlines and politics matter more than moon marks—" "The moon never took her," Adrian interrupted, his voice carrying alpha command that made every wolf bow instinctively. He moved to stand beside Lysandra, his hand finding hers, their bond blazing brighter at the touch. "You did. You stole 8 years from both of us. You made me believe my mate was Ash when she was screaming beneath my feet. You wore her crown while she counted stones in the dark." He looked at the assembled pack, his eyes blazing gold and absolute. "And now, the moon takes back what's hers." Cassius nodded gravely. "Luna Miriel Valcor, you are hereby stripped of title, stripped of pack bond, and banished beyond our borders under moon law. You will carry no name, no protection, no right to return. The packs will know what you are: oathbreaker, bond thief, traitor to sacred law." Guards moved forward, but before they could take her, Lysandra stepped forward. She faced the woman who'd stolen everything, who'd kept her in darkness, who'd whispered cruelties for 8 years. And when she spoke, her voice was steady for the first time since her resurrection. "You told me I was nothing," Lysandra said quietly, "that I never existed, that the world had forgotten me." She smiled, small and fierce and utterly unbroken. "But some wolves are born to survive the grave and still rise, and you should have killed me when you had the chance." Miriel had no response. What could she say? She'd gambled everything on a lie, and the truth had buried her instead. As guards escorted her through the crowd toward the territory borders, the pack remained silent. No jeers, no anger, just the cold finality of justice served. When Miriel disappeared into the darkness beyond the torchlight, Cassius turned to Adrian and Lysandra. "By moon law and pack authority, I ask, Alpha King Adrian Valcor, do you claim this woman as your fated mate and true Luna?" Adrian dropped to one knee before Lysandra, not as king before subject, but as man before destiny. He took her hands in his, and when he spoke, his voice carried every ounce of 8 years' worth of grief, rage, and desperate love. "I claim her as mine, as she has always been mine, as the moon marked her mine before either of us understood what that meant." His voice broke. I failed to protect her once. I will spend every day of my life ensuring I never fail her again." Lysandra's eyes filled with tears, but they weren't tears of sorrow anymore. "And do you, Lysandra Thorne, accept this bond? Accept the position of Luna that was stolen from you?" She looked down at Adrian, at this man who'd searched for her without knowing, who'd mourned her without knowing she still breathed, whose wolf had waited 8 years in silence because it knew destiny wasn't finished. "I accept," she whispered. "I accept the bond. I accept him. I accept what was always meant to be mine." The pack howled. It started with the elders, then spread through the warriors, the families, the children. Hundreds of voices lifting in acknowledgement, in celebration, in recognition of their true Luna finally taking her rightful place. Adrian stood, pulling Lysandra against his chest, and kissed her beneath the full moon while their pack sang Destiny's Triumph. Her wolf blazed silver, his burned gold. Together, they lit up the night like fallen stars finally finding their way home. And as the howls echoed across the territory, as the moon bathed them in light that felt like benediction, Lysandra whispered against Adrian's chest. Not to him, but to herself, to the girl who'd counted stones in darkness, to the woman who'd survived what should have killed her. Some wolves are born to survive the grave and still rise. She had been buried alive, but she had never been dead. And now, crowned in moonlight and wrapped in her mate's arms, she finally, truly began to live. Thank you so much for watching till the end. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our next upload. I'd also love to hear your thoughts. Tell me in the comments what you think about this story and where you're watching from. Your support means a lot and helps us keep creating more stories like this. Until next time, stay safe, stay inspired.